And without further ado, His Worship Doug Craig.
Well, once again, it's great to be here this morning, and I was commenting on the large crowd, and someone sort of whispered in my ear, it's the weather. Don't think it's because of you this morning. But you know what? What's kind of nice, too, is it's a friendly crowd, because we don't often, in my line of work, get friendly crowds. And we really appreciate that. The only other place I go where there are friendly crowds is schools. And I go out to schools on an average, usually once a month, usually mostly elementary schools, and talk to the kids, and they'll ask you, what's it like to be mayor? And I say, well, we have good days and bad days, and days when funny things happen, and days when very serious things happen. And then they ask you all these important questions that are really quite insightful and thought-provoking. And you always have to tell the truth. And they'll ask you, do you have a chauffeur-driven limousine? Do you live in a mansion? And of course, I say no, but Councillor Frank Montero does. But anyways, it's a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. And we start off this day, I'm going to make some comments just in general. That, you have these times in your life when you reflect on things. For me, it's usually between 2 and 3 in the morning, when I usually wake up most nights during that time period, when I used to walk my black lab buddy out in the trail system, and sometimes just driving down to City Hall. And I think over the 16 years that I've been mayor, what's really interesting and what makes me feel very good about the city, if not great about the city, is that the city is doing so well in all areas. And we're very proud of that. And I think we should be as a community. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But I'm going to start off with the whole issue around mayors and the changing roles of mayors and councillors to some extent. And our roles are changing because the world is changing. And I think it's necessary for us to get out of this custodial kind of role that we've played for decades, where we take care of the leaves and the snow and the water and the pipes. And we have to now, in a global economy, have to be going out more on a national, international basis in terms of bringing business and a new flourishing economics into our communities. And our roles are changing. And it's roles that cost more money at times, and it's roles that take us away from our cities. And I've been away from the city more than I ever have in the last 2 and 3 years, because we're in Ottawa, we're in Windsor, we're down to California, we're in Geneva a couple of years ago making a presentation on our digital library, things like that. And these are the things that are now changing and which are defining what mayors are all about. And I think to some extent, it's something that that the news media, and I think the public, is starting to assimilate, that in fact these are necessary things and things that are so important in the evolution of our communities. I'm going to start with the innovation corridor that we talked about. It's been in the news quite a bit lately. And it's really about a collaboration between the City of Toronto, John Tory, the Mayor of Toronto, Waterloo, Cambridge, and Kitchener, and working together. And what we have come to sort of an agreement on, and what we find is so necessary, is that there has to be a new understanding of cooperation amongst our cities and how we define what is good for our overall regional community and what is good in terms of our individual cities. And that is a cooperation, I think, that is now emerging. It's not about competing with each other, because where we really compete is outside this corridor in terms of other areas of the country, other areas internationally. I mean, we are setting up this tech corridor from Toronto to the region of Waterloo, which is the second largest in North America, next to Silicon Valley. And it's an area which, in fact, has great promise and a great future in terms of the outcomes that we're looking for. We look at our community today, City of Cambridge, the region, the other municipalities, and we're living in good times. We have the lowest unemployment in the country. And it's something we should all be proud of. And that's a result of leadership. It's a result of the staff we have in all our communities and what they're doing. And it's about the policies we've put in place. And we're doing very, very well in so many respects in that sense. So when we went off in terms of working together in this sort of new cooperation, we understand something, that if a new high-tech plant or organization comes into the city of Waterloo, it benefits everybody in the region. We will have people living in Cambridge that will work up there. We will have people up in Waterloo who who work there also would live in other cities. So we understand that bringing new industry into our communities is so important with regards to the fact that we all benefit from it. So it's not a competition between each other. It's a cooperation and it's an understanding, and a major understanding for all of us that myself, Barry, and Dave have come to an agreement on is that quality of life in this region is ultimately one of the most important things we have. So we went to California a couple of months ago and spent a lot of time down there. And if you look at the slide there, the three rookies are Barry, Dave, and John Tory, just so we can just sort of define that right now. And we had this opportunity, and it was extremely well laid out by our new economic development cooperative department that we have throughout the region. We went to Google, we went to Cisco, we talked to the economic development departments of San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles. And it's all about connections, and it's all about getting to know these people. You sit in a dinner meeting put on by the Canadian consulate down there with 20 investors who all are managers of funds of over $1 billion, and you talk about the region of Waterloo and the new innovation corridor that's being set up with Toronto. And one of the most impressive things for me really was John Tory. John Tory treats all of us as equals in terms of how he talks to us and how we relate together. So it's a great team effort, and very proud of my colleagues and how we work through all these different issues. But, one of the things too, and I said this publicly at another meeting, you get to know the other mayors and you get to know the staff when you spend time together. It's kind of an intimate relationship, well, maybe a familiar relationship, I should change words, that you develop with people. And so, with Barry, and I said this publicly, the guy is the energized bunny. This guy is moving around all the time. He's moving from city to city, doing things from his long experience at FCM, doing things for his community, coming back to us and bringing us in on the new knowledge and information he's got. I mean, he's buzzing all the time. And I kind of wondered, how does he do these things? What are kind of the insights that I might get from him? Well, it's how he packs his clothing. Now, believe it or not, for 2 suits, I want to show you this, 2 suits, he's got weeks full of shirts and all the rest of it, and he has a special way he does it, and we'll see in this next slide here. And he carries this around everywhere. And believe me, I'm thinking, what is this guy all about? And that's what he's all about. Barry Verbonovic is all about Barry Verbonovic, and he sets his own edge in the world, and he moves ahead, and we work together. And of course, I can't leave Dave out of this. I got to know Dave very well also. He's up in the morning, he's walking 2 and 3 kilometers in the morning, he's out in the evenings walking 3-4 kilometers, and I'm kind of wondering, what kind of special diet is this guy on? Well, we get to see it in the next slide. That's true. I'm not making that up. Anyways, so we move on. San Francisco was great in terms of the city age, in terms of the conference that we went to, and we spent a lot of time there. And one of the things we have is we're too modest. And John Tory made that point to an American crowd. As Canadians, we're too modest. He talked about the healthcare system we have here. He talked about maternity leave. He talked about the affordability of housing and living here. We talked about the emergency services we have in this region and how well off we are, and you reflect also on the school system we have, which is equitable throughout the region. That's not true in a number of the cities of the United States. People move from district to district to get the best schooling. And these are the things we brought out, that in fact, Canadians are too modest. We don't talk about ourselves enough, and we don't in fact tell the world how really great we are. We should be very proud. I mean, John Tory stood there and he says, you know what? This is to an American audience. When you were talking about Donald Trump's small hands, we were bringing in 25,000 Syrian refugees. And they applauded, and they thought that was great. And they see the humanity of who we are as a country, and they see the fact that, in fact, we have things that are so demonstrable in terms of attracting people. And we've got to play on those issues. And that's one thing that we learned when we were there. I think also, when you come into the city of Cambridge, we're modest also. And I say that because if you look at our city, and I've said it many, many times, we have one of the most beautiful urban settings in Ontario. And we're a river city. You know, when you start at the Mill Pond up in Hespeler as an example, and you course the way down through Riverside Park, and then eventually into our downtown, you know, it's something that we need to be very proud of, and proud of the fact of what our background is and what we offer people within the regional community and within Ontario. I mean, we're very fortunate that way. And the other thing is we have a proud history. People don't know certain things about our history. Joseph E. Seagram, who was the founder of Seagram Distillery, in fact, was living on Fisher Mills up in Cambridge in the Hespeler area at one point. We have Peter Zowski, CBC Radio, who in fact, you know, is a great famous announcer that in fact was a Cambridge native. And I'm going to tell you just a short story. In 1976, I met a gentleman on the sidewalk down on Concession Street. You have these moments in your life when you remember things. And I stood there and I talked to him at length, and he was a former mayor. And I said to him, "Where are you going? What's happening with you?" He said, "Well, I'm going to Toronto. I'm going to be starting a film production company." And he's putting his life savings into it. And I thought, walking away, why would you do that? Well, his name was Bob Kerr, and he was one of the founders of IMAX Theater. And I remember that as clear as a bell that evening. These are the people that have been part of our community, part of what have made Cambridge and given its foundation for entrepreneurship. The only thing he didn't leave was his DNA for the rest of the mayors to be more innovative. But anyways, well, that's the part of our history, and that's what we ought to be proud of. And we're not proud all the time. We got to sing that song. We got to put those tunes out there. And as Canadians and as people from the city of Cambridge, we got to be proud of the community that we have. So, you know, we talk about our community. I think it's really important, and I use this phrase all the time. You've got to have balance in your community. You've got to have balance in terms of what you're doing. You know, you have to, we don't create jobs in the city of Cambridge. We set the background. We do the infrastructure. We prepare everything for businesses to come in and to create the jobs for us and to build the economy. So what we do is we do the infrastructure. We do the transportation systems. We promote the heritage aspects of our community, the health aspects of our community. These are all components in an economic ecosystem that are important in terms of putting together the backdrop or the urban foundation for businesses to come in here. And that's what we do. And you know what? We've done it well, I think, in so many respects. You just have to look at the heritage in the city, and in particular, the old post office that, in fact, right now is under construction. This is a marriage of the past and the future. This is a post office that was designed by the federal architect that did Fuller, who did the Parliament buildings in Ottawa, and in fact was given the designation to do post offices. So it was built in about the 1880s, 1870s, and what it is, it's a marriage of the past with the future, because we're using it as an expansion of our new library. And it just received an architectural commendation. This is the new library that we're building. It'll be done in December of 2017. It just won an award, and it's only just right now under construction in terms of its reverberation from Cannes, France. And the architect went over and received the award, a commendation, pardon me. And you know, it's a great compliment to what we are doing. Once this is finished, it will be one of the very few e-libraries in Canada. It really will. Digital libraries. And we should be proud of that, because we are moving into quite a bit in terms of a digital society. The next thing that was really important, and I remember when Catherine McGarry got elected and appointed to be part of working with the Transportation Minister as a parliamentary assistant. And I slept well that night. I thought, finally, we have somebody that's going to be right there to help us in terms of the GO trains and GO buses coming into Cambridge. Well, here we are. It's not a GO train. It is the open door to a GO train. We're getting GO buses in the fall. We're getting 4 in the morning, 4 in the evening. They're starting at Ainsley Street Station. And they will, in fact, be meeting the trains in Milton for the particular times that they're arriving. Key to this, though, are the HOV lanes that I think we need on the 401. I've talked to the region about this. I've talked to my council about this. This is ultimately very important to make sure the timetables are set. It doesn't just serve Cambridge. It serves South Kitchener. It serves the transportation corridor, the innovation corridor that we've all talked about. It's so important to all of us. And that has come about as a result of the collaboration between the regional chair, and the mayors of this region who met months ago with the Premier of Ontario and the Transportation Minister and said, we got to do more in terms of the transportation links to this community. It's one of the premier communities in Canada, and that has been now recognized. And when I walked out of that meeting, I remember thinking, finally, because you saw that sincerity in their eyes, they're going to do something. Well, the Transportation Minister has come through, and he's done it. Very proud of that, very proud of the contributions that Catherine has done, of my colleagues who have worked with us to bring this to the notice with the authorities in Ontario. But moving along, infrastructure is important. Of course, there's always the roundabouts and on Franklin Boulevard. And when we started all of this, everybody was up in arms about too many roundabouts, like Mozart, too many notes, too many roundabouts. And you move on, and you know what I'm finding from people and the commentary from people, they like them. And that's kind of the bottom line. But more importantly, what's being lost in all of this is the fact that roundabouts diminish fatalities by about 85%. That's the most important thing. And for me, I think as a community, it builds a safe community, which we're all very proud of. Next thing is affordable housing. This is the new structure that we're looking at approving right now on 175 Hespeler Road. We have postponed the development charges for 20 years so they can get off the ground without having to deal with that issue. And we're looking at approximately, I think it's about 35 units. But overall, in the city of Cambridge, I think we have about 800 or 900 people on a waiting list for affordable housing. If we're going to deal with affordable housing in the region, we're going to deal with affordable housing in the city of Cambridge, then you have to, or poverty, pardon me, then you have to have affordable housing. That's how you diminish poverty. It's the key ingredient that all activists dealing with the poverty issue will talk about. And that's ultimately very important for all of us. The living wage, the first municipality in Ontario to institute the beginning steps of a living wage, which sets a precedent in terms of the fact that we value everybody, and everybody should benefit from everything that's happening in the profitability of a community and what's happening within that community. The next thing, of course, is right beside us. It's our Cambridge Memorial Hospital. That's been a 15-year-long battle. Since I was mayor back in 2000, I talked to 5 health ministers, and finally, again, to Catherine McGarry and the Liberal government we have in Ontario, we finally see the hospital under construction. The opening phase will be opening, I believe, it's the fall of 2017. And again, it's a quality of life issue. I mean, people will locate here. Businesses will locate here. Professionals will come here if there's a good healthcare system, a good hospital, an abundance of doctors to choose from. That's why people come. That's one of the things that they're looking for. And that's why it's so very important to all of us that, in fact, when we build a community, we build all these different aspects for quality of life. The next one is not quite what you would think would be a quality of life, but is in fact the pier for the new pedestrian bridge. People wanted to know if it was strong enough. Well, it used to hold locomotives, so I think we're okay in terms of pedestrians on a bridge going across the river. We are, and I said this last year, we are a river city. We need to come to terms with it. And you look at river cities across the world, whether in fact it's in Europe in terms of London, England, whether it's in fact Western Canada, they all have pedestrian bridges. They all want to interconnect with each side, and I think it's ultimately very important. Again, it's one of those quality of life issues that's important to us. And with that is the pedestrian bridge and how it's going to look. It's the most simple. It's probably the simplest thing you could make. And then beside that are the Woolen Mill walkway that in fact is now being contemplated as part of the walkway system that will go with it. Next, of course, in terms of quality of life, is the sportsplex that everybody is hearing a debate about. And of course, to be or not to be. Well, in my books, it's to be. And this fall, we will be having further meetings and we'll make a decision. The issue just simply isn't as simple as people want to make it as location. It's how much can this community afford in building the kind of sportsplex that the recreational needs are dictating. That's the issue that's now emerging. We are at the verge, the limits of what we can afford. If we go with 4 pads, if we go with a leisure pool and a competition pool of 10 lanes with gallery space, if we go with 3 gyms. If we go with a walkway system, which is doubled in size around the whole complex for people to walk, we're up into the $78 million range. But right now we don't have an address. So when I go to Ottawa, which I did 3 or 4 weeks ago, looking for money, they want an address of where it's going. Because there's a window of opportunity which is very, very narrow here. And it's something we have to be aware of. Those discussions will go on, and we'll hear from everybody. But I think the most important thing to do is to weigh off the recreational needs and the cost of the community as two of the more important factors that we need to look at. The next thing, of course, is the core area development that's taking place, and I'm very proud of this. It's been years, but we have the Riverside development now taking place in Hespeler. And I want to publicly thank Scott Higgins of HIP Developments. Scott and I discussed this over a period of time. How big would the apartment building be? And it started at 18 stories, then it went down to 14 stories, and finally we discussed it. I said, he came back with 9 at the front part on Queen Street, and I said, well, I can live with that. Because it's a small village, and there's got to be a scale, there has to be a relationship. My point is that when you work with developers like Scott, you work with people that believe in the community and are prepared to compromise to make it the best for the community. He's been very successful in putting this together. Apparently I think there's 40 condo units and 45 condo units and 157 rentals, and I think he has oversubscribed a number of them in terms of people wanting them, and they're not even built yet. But that's because it's on the Mill Pond, and the Mill Pond is one of the most untold gems we have in this community, and we forget that at times. And when you go up there and you look at the Mill Pond area, you realize how beautiful it is. Of course, the other shot of Riverside showing the apartments, and as you move into the downtown, you look at the refurbished courthouse, which is now going to be a world gym, which I think is terrific in terms of how you can refurbish things. The Cambridge Mill Hotel and Condo, this is what was proposed a number of months ago, and what they're looking at, and they're moving ahead. They've done an audit, phase 1 audit on the first phase, which has been completed. They're into their second phase because it's a contaminated site. And they're looking towards having a 5-star hotel in the downtown with condominiums right on the river. So this is another aspect of where we're going. But when I talk about balance, I mean balance also in the Hespeler, the Galt area, and the Preston area. And of course, I got a postcard here of what Preston area used to look like at one time at King Street and Fountain Street. And you get an opportunity to see what it used to be, and of course there's nothing there right now in that site but a hole in the ground. Well, this is what's being proposed by a developer, and what they're looking at is taking the historical context and characteristics of the old Del Monte and Crest hotels and building it into a brand new development. And I think that's really important in terms of establishing and reflecting on the character of the community. They're looking at condos, 169 condos, underground parking, and they're looking forward to making this proposal, coming in for application late summer, early fall, and that's in the Preston area. So across the city, we're seeing that development everywhere, and I think it's something we should all be proud of. I think also when I reflect on the community and how well it's doing, Dunfield Theatre, again, and again, has sellout performances. Mamma Mia, I just went to recently, and it was terrific, one of the finest performances ever. And we're so fortunate to have Dunfield here in Cambridge. We really are. We've got a cultural draw. We have an economic multiplier that has made a great impact in our city. But I want to move on, and I want to talk about sort of philosophically where I think we ought to be going as communities. Cities have to be a national priority. We're not a national priority. And what I mean by that is we have to have the federal and provincial governments understand that, in fact, cities are the future of Canada. It's not the lumbering industry anymore, the fishing industry, the mining industry. It's not the oil sands of Alberta. It's cities. Cities across the world, most people, 80% of the world population now live in cities. And in Canada, I think it's even much higher. And it's the cities that are the future in terms of the golden geese, or the golden geese that are laying the golden eggs in terms of taxes for the federal and provincial governments. But there's problems with cities because we're absolutely underfunded. We cannot go into the future, and I've said this repeatedly, on property tax alone user fees, the money we get from kids swimming in our pools, and government handouts. That is not the way we can be sustainable into the future. So in the next slide, in the bottom right-hand corner, you look at the infrastructure debt for the city of Cambridge, which is quite substantial. It's $141 million. And people will say to us, well, why aren't you doing something about that? Why are you building a pedestrian bridge, or why are you building a theater when we have such a huge infrastructure deficit? And of course, they don't understand that there's a history here of why this has happened. And I think it's important to understand that there has been changes in downloading going on over the years. So let's look at infrastructure ownership over the last number of years. And if you look at the federal government in 1955, it had 39% of the infrastructure ownership in Canada. Today, it has 13%. The provincial government had 34%. It went up 1 percentage point to 35. The municipal governments had 27% of the ownership, and it's gone up to 52%. It's called downloading or musical chairs. The only problem is when the music stopped, the cities didn't have a chair to sit on. And that's why we have the infrastructure debt and debits that you see being talked about all the time. Because the downloading has hurt us immensely in terms of being able to run our cities and to reflect on our communities in terms of building a better future. The other thing, of course, that's the capital side. The other thing, of course, are the local taxes in three cities. And I showed this slide at December. And you have 3 cities. You have a European city of Berlin, Waterloo region, I sort of grouped that together. And of course, you have the city of New York. And you look at the taxes that Berlin, and you look at the taxes that New York have, and then you relate it to what the region of Waterloo has in terms of simply property tax, in terms of simply user fees and government grants once in a while. And you see this vast difference. In the United States, property tax makes up 15% of the revenue. In Europe, it's 5%, and in Canada, it's over 50%. And that's the difference. And that's why we struggle with what we are doing. We are fiscally healthy. We're fiscally healthy because we have to have balanced budgets. We're fiscally healthy because we have a debt limit. We can only go so far, not like everybody else, the other governments. That's what makes us fiscally healthy. But because we're in that kind of vice, we can't go out and spend extra millions of dollars and on infrastructure and things we need to do because of those limitations. Those limitations are okay. I'm not disputing that. It's just that we don't have the funding to do all the other things we need to do. And the property tax is essentially, and as people will tell you, it's going up year after year after year. It's a very visible tax, and it's very difficult for communities to carry on doing what they want to do, because what does the public always say to us at budget time? I don't want it to be any higher than the rate of inflation. How do you build a community for the future on the rate of inflation? The point is you don't. And so what I'm saying, that there is hope. And when we were in, and I think there is hope because what we need to do is we need to flatline the property tax and have other sources of money that we can be more dependent on. But there is hope. The Prime Minister Trudeau, and he made a historical commitment. We were in Ottawa about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and I'm sitting there around the table with Barry and Dave and the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, and I asked him the direct question, are you willing to sit down with the mayors of Ontario to discuss a future in terms of sustainable funding for cities? And he said yes. And then he went on at length, and he gets it and he understands it. In other words, we have an opportunity to open a door here. And Rob Burton, the mayor of Burlington, said this is a historic moment. No prime minister of a federal government has ever made a commitment like that. They don't see cities or potholes as their issue. It is everybody's issue. And in fact, I've asked the Prime Minister, he's agreed that he will do it, and I've worked with Adam Vaughan out of Toronto, who's a close collaborator of the Prime Minister, to say, how can we set this up? So I'll be talking to my colleagues about moving forward, and I'm hopeful that next spring we can start those discussions to change funding for cities. We can start discussions to now flatlining property taxes, which we really need to do. because it's getting out of hand for everybody. And so that's the promise of the future. You know, I watched Justin Trudeau about 7 or 8 years ago. He came to Waterloo County, and I thought, is he going to be as good as his dad? And I was really quite impressed, and I'm always impressed now. And what's difficult for me is he's younger than me. And it's hard for me to accept that. It really is, because when you get older, well, everybody's young to me now. But anyways, it's difficult to accept that at times. But he's a very engaging person, and when he speaks to you like he is the only person, you're the only person in the day. And that's what makes him so good about what he does. And he has really opened up the door to new ways of thinking and new ways of sharing. I mean, billions and billions of dollars in taxes are leaving the region of Waterloo every year. I only want 1% of it. That's all I want, just 1%. That's not a lot. It's enough to make us sustainable, though, for each of the municipalities. So there is a future here. And in conclusion, as I come back to it, cities are the future. Mayors have got to get out of this custodial role and become what we are doing right now, is moving internationally and nationally and coming up with new ways of looking at things, of building a high-tech corridor, of doing all those things. That's how we're going to build our city. And we're going to build it by an understanding that all the components in a community, whether it's heritage infrastructure, whether it's hospital, whether it's theaters, these are the components that make a city great. And that's what we have to emphasize and what we have to reflect on. We're fortunate in this city. We have a great river system. We are a river city. We've got to keep coming back to that. We have to keep building on it, reflecting on it. We have to realize that the future is the same as the past. People came here because of the river, and we're here because of the river and what it offers us. And we have to bring people back to an understanding that in this present day, we have a lot of opportunities. It's going to take leadership. Leadership's tough. The mayors know it. We're the ones that get beat up all the time. We're the ones that are unpopular when we make difficult decisions. I say to my council, when you're unpopular, that's actually when you're really doing your job. And there's a lot of truth in that. And it's difficult for us to do, and we will continue to do it because we believe in it. But the outcomes for this community have in the past, in the present, and will in the future be positive because I believe we're all on the right track. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Questions? Anybody got any nice questions for the mayor? I can talk to you after. I just thought if you wanted to. We're available. You got Barry and Dave here. You have the mayors of the townships here. We're all there. We all work together, and certainly we should. We're prepared to talk to you. So thank you very much again.